and let me know when we're... All right, we are gathered to take up the study of Karma Yoga, Swami Vivekananda's seminal text on how to convert all our actions, convert our life into spiritual practice. How do we work in this world? And so we'll open with a prayer. Join me if you know it. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. So, this opening prayer from the Upanishads, that we may, this may not just be an intellectual exercise. May what we study actually be practical to us. May we be able to put this into practice in our lives, and may it bring us to our spiritual unfoldment. So, Swami Vivekananda returned from England to New York in December of 1895, and he reached New York on the 6th December, and immediately dove into his classes. And they placed an ad for a stenographer, and Hosea Goodwin answered the call and became the stenographer. So these were taken down by a professional who became very much devoted to Swami Vivekananda and Vedanta. So he took down notes, and we're going to read practically a transcript of the classes Swami Vivekananda was giving. And so he had Karma Yoga classes, Raja Yoga classes, the classes on meditation. He had the Jnana Yoga classes on wisdom, and the Bhakti Yoga classes on devotion, all in these same weeks, these last weeks of December and first weeks of January. And Fridays were for Karma Yoga. And interestingly, he gave a morning class and an evening class. And the morning class was for advanced students, and the evening class was for beginner students. So there's always a question, in which order should we read these classes? Should we study these classes? Should we read them as he gave them? First the class for advanced students, and then the class one for beginner students, and like that. Well, we have decided in this series to read them in order of beginner to advanced. So we've read actually all 4 beginners classes and the next 2 advanced classes. So we're now in the 3rd class for advanced students, which he gave on Friday, January 3rd at 228 West 39th Street. If you're familiar with New York City, the original building is not there anymore. It was a brownstone. It was upstairs. There were 2 rooms, no bathroom or kitchen. The bathroom was upstairs, the kitchen was downstairs. And Ellen Waldo was coming over every day to cook for Swamiji. And the temperature on Friday, January 3rd, the low was 24 degrees Fahrenheit, and the high was 45. So in the morning, it probably would have still been pretty chilly. But they had heat, steam heat in the buildings. And his topic, these topics are added afterwards. Someone decided that the best way to call this 3rd class for advanced students is non-attachment is complete self-abnegation. sounds like a pretty severe title. So I looked up abnegation. What does abnegation mean, self-abnegation? Well, it means, abnegation means act of renouncing or rejecting something. Denial, especially self-denial. So abnegation already has the meaning of self-denial, and then you add the self-abnegation, self-denial, self-sacrifice. The first definition on Google says denial or abasement of oneself. So it sounds pretty horrible. There's a more nuanced definition I found: the setting aside of self-interest for the sake of others or for a belief or principle. Okay, setting aside of self-interest for the sake of others or for a belief or principle. That's a little more digestible. I'm sure it's a common term in religions, in Christianity also, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, this idea of self-abnegation. And we have a lot of negative associations with the word. You know, we think of hair shirts and flagellation and stuff like that, and then beds of nails. Okay, that's not what it means. Those practices were done, and probably, hopefully, are not done much nowadays, to deny the body. But here we are embodied. What do we do about that? I think it makes more sense to understand this as reducing our obsession with ourselves and our little self, our little ego, our little small personality with a small s, which is all caught up in all its likes and dislikes and all its emotional entanglements and all of that. And it's very interesting that now there are a lot of scientists who are studying the science of happiness. A lot means a few psychologists. And one of them actually lives in Santa Monica and teaches at the University of California, Riverside. And she wrote a book on the method of happiness. And by doing studies and tests and things like that, she and her colleagues have found that doing things for others makes us happier. Being more generous makes us happier. Doing kind acts for others makes us happier. So self-abnegation sounds horrible, but actually if we understand it in its true meaning, being forgiving, being generous, true generosity means we have to sacrifice something. We have to give up, we have to undergo perhaps some suffering for the sake of somebody else. Those who learn to do that, according to the scientists, become happier. So it's the same idea behind Vedanta. When we start to expand our sense of who we are, when we start to feel that we are not limited to this one body and this one little personality, but that we are actually all connected, we are all interconnected. And the highest realization, I find that every being is within my own self, and I find my own self within every being. So that's the goal of karma yoga, is to attain the direct realization of that, to know that we are all connected, that ultimately it is just me. There's just the one self, but not this little me, the big me with a capital M or a capital S. And that is the condition of tremendous peace and joy, more than we can imagine, actually. That joy of knowing our true self, not separate from anybody else, not separate from God. So this is how, what Swami Vivekananda takes up in this class. Perfect non-attachment. Non-attachment is, what's the title? No, I forgot here. Non-attachment is complete self-abnegation. And it follows immediately from his class of the previous week, which was the secret of work. What was the secret of work? Do you remember? Non-attachment. The secret of work was non-attachment, and now he's going to explore that more deeply. Well, how do we really attain that non-attachment? It's very difficult to attain non-attachment. When in work, we so easily get attached. We so easily get strong feelings about, I'm doing this work and I want it to go a certain way. So he's going to look more deeply into non-attachment, and as clearly suggesting from the title, that it ends up in self-abnegation. Perhaps you remember that very moving and yet difficult story he told at the end of the last class of the mongoose who turned half gold and was looking for another sacrifice, what turned his body half gold was he witnessed a sacrifice, and the sacrifice was this family of 4 who were there was a famine and they were starving to death, and finally they had managed to get just enough food for 1 meal, and they divided it into 4 parts and were about to sit down, and a knock comes on the door, and the stranger has come, an unexpected guest who's starving to death. And though they hadn't eaten for 10 days, the stranger hadn't eaten for 20 days or something like that. And so they welcome him in, and as is the duty of the householder, he gave his portion to the guest. And he devoured it and said, "Sir, you're killing me. You've only made me feel all the more hungry." And so the woman, the mother, also gives her portion. And he's still hungry. And then the 2 children, they also give their portion. Finally, he's satisfied, and he blesses them, and he goes on his way. And that night, they all die of starvation. And the few grains of dust, of flour that had fallen on the ground, the mongoose rolled his body in that dust, and his body became golden. And since then, half golden, and since then he was wandering around across the world to find another sacrifice so his body could be fully golden. And so there was this tremendous sacrifice conducted by a great king, which with so many gifts given and so many people fed and all that, and he rolled in the dust there, and body didn't turn golden, and said, this is no sacrifice. I have seen a real sacrifice. So this is that idea of completely sacrificing yourself for others. We may not be there yet, but we understand something of that ideal. We can be inspired by that ideal. Let's read the text. In the last class on Karma Yoga, we were considering how our own actions come back to ourselves. Today, we will consider how the actions of one person act upon another. Okay, interesting. And that's more or less right. Mostly up till now, we've been discussing how our actions, what effect our actions have on ourselves, on our first, and on different levels, of course, on the level of character. Of repeated, our actions form our character, actually. When we do an action, especially a repeated action, it becomes a habit. And a habit is a reflection of our character. And at the same time, every action we perform has a kind of cosmic effect, which is what we usually think of when we use the term karma. Oh, bad karma. We do a wicked act, it will result in some kind of misery in the future. Now he's going to also explore how our actions affect others. Just as every action that emanates from us comes back to us, even so, our actions may act on other people and theirs may act upon us. Perhaps all of you have observed it as a fact that when persons do evil actions, they become more and more evil, and when they begin to do good, they become stronger and stronger and do good all the time. This is what we were talking about, this habit, the force of habit. Now he's going to suggest that there's more influences than just our own. This multiplication of action cannot be explained on any other ground except that we can act and react upon each other. To take a simile from physical science, when I am doing a certain action, my mind is in a certain form of vibration. All minds under similar circumstances would have the tendency to be affected by my mind. He's going to give the perfect example of musical instruments. If there are different musical instruments in one room, all of you have noticed that if one is struck, the others have the tendency to vibrate the same note. Of course, if they're tuned in the same way. This is like the opera singer who can break a crystal glass with her voice. Is that true, or is that just a myth? It depends?
It depends on the type of glass. Crystal would be the right
Crystal, it'll have to be crystal. A certain kind of glass, and it has to be a certain kind of singer who can, generally a female voice which can go very high, and I know we have musicians here in the among us.
It just has to be the same vibration that the glass.
Yes.
Same vibration.
Yeah.
So that's the
same thing happens with like bridges too.
Yeah.
Yes.
bridges.
Yeah. The amplitude multiplies in squares.
Oh, so if people, when armies march across bridges, they have to break their march, their constant stepping, or they can break the bridge. Yeah, I've heard that. Yes. So here, Swami Vivekananda is suggesting that our minds are also like that our minds can affect each other, even at a distance. And when we do, well, let's read a little more. He'll explain it more thoroughly. So taking this as an illustration, it shows that the instruments had each the same tendency and would be affected alike by the same impulse. So all minds that have the same tension will be equally affected by the same thought. Of course, it will vary according to the distance, but it will be open to be affected. It's fascinating, actually, that Swami Vivekananda here is suggesting that as we do wicked things, if we have wicked thoughts, other wicked thoughts which are coming from other minds will affect and strengthen our wicked tendency. And likewise, our wicked tendency will strengthen the wicked tendency in others, and vice versa for good tendencies. Very interesting. Suppose I am doing an evil act. My mind is in a certain state of tension, and all minds in the universe in the same tension will have the possibility of being affected by my mind. So, similarly, when I am doing a good action, my mind has another state of tension, and all minds similarly stringed will have the possibility of being affected. And this power of affection will be more and more or less according to the tendency. So it's a science of vibrations. We often talk about a place having good vibes. Here, basically, Swamiji, or a person having good vibes, or maybe bad vibes, Swamiji's talking about, he's talking about this, placing it on a little bit more scientific basis, you can say. So, following this simile further, it is quite possible that just as light waves may travel for millions of years before they reach their object, so these thought waves may travel hundreds of years until they are obstructed by an object which they strike. It is quite possible, therefore, that this atmosphere of ours is full of such thought pulsations, both good and evil. We don't see them, of course. Like, where are they? Let me dodge the bad ones. But it's a wonderful and amazing proposition. It reminds me of that line in Raja Yoga, which he says, every wicked thought must rebound. There he's talking about the effect on ourselves. Every thought we have thought, even in a cave somewhere, must come back and bring its result back to us. Here he's saying, yes, to us, and it's quite possible that that thought may go on. And he suggests somewhere else, I can't remember the reference right now, that the greatest souls are unknown. And they may be in a cave somewhere thinking good thoughts, and those good thoughts spread all over the world and reverberate and echo in the hearts of all those hearts which are tuned to receive that vibration. So let us go on sending out good thoughts. In his instructions for meditation, what does Swami Vivekananda say? After you sit and do some deep breathing to calm your mind, the next thing is, he says, send a current of holy thought to all creation. Send a current of holy thought to may all be healthy, may all be happy, may all be peaceful. Send it out to the north and to the east and to the south and to the west. So we may think, what good will that do? Actually, according to this, it may do a lot of good. We're sending out a holy thought. We're placing our minds in a certain state of vibration, and that vibration must have its effect. Every thought projected from every brain goes on pulsating, as it were, until it meets an object. Obviously in the subtle level, not on this gross plane. We can't measure it with a scientific instrument. It's the minds which are subtle that can feel it. This would explain perhaps also how someone can, I'm thinking of one senior monk who had an uncanny way of understanding what you're thinking. How could he do that? All right. Every thought projected from every brain goes on pulsating, as it were, until it meets an object, like another mind. Any mind which is opening itself to receive some of these will receive them immediately. So, when a person is doing evil actions, he or she has brought the mind to a certain state of tension, and all the waves corresponding to that state of tension, which are in the atmosphere already, will struggle to get to this state. In other words, as we put our minds in a certain state of tension, we are going to receive other vibrations of that nature, which I think is also one of our Swamis. The article of one of Swami Bhajanananda's articles in the Prabhupada Bharata, he remarks that great souls go on praying for everybody. If we bring our minds into harmony, say, and they go on praying usually to a certain aspect of the divine. So say the great saints are constantly praying to Krishna. And as we bring our minds into harmony with Krishna, as we begin to focus on Krishna, those prayers of all those saints are reflected into our hearts. So this is part of that the author of that article probably may well have taken some inspiration from this idea that we bring our minds into a certain state of tension. Of course, he's gone into someone doing evil. An evildoer generally goes on doing more and more evil. His or her action will be intensified. Such also will be the case, thank goodness, with the doer of good. He or she will open herself to all the good waves that are in the atmosphere, and her or his good actions will be intensified. So then he cautions us, there's a twofold danger in doing evil, in doing wicked actions. There's twofold danger. One, we run therefore a twofold danger in doing evil. First, we open ourselves to all the evil influences surrounding us. It's not just that we're doing something bad and that karma is going to come back. We also open ourselves to the evil influences, the low vibrations set in motion by others. Secondly, we create so much evil to affect others. It may be possible that our evil actions will affect others hundreds of years hence. In doing evil, we injure ourselves and others also. In doing good, we do good to ourselves and others also. And like all other forces in us, these good and evil forces gather strength from outside. Okay, that's a pretty sobering assessment. Remembering this, it can help us, no? When we're tempted to maybe do something which is not so wholesome. We know it's not so wholesome, but what does it matter? No one will know. According to this idea, we affect others, even if we don't know it. Just simply by thinking a wicked thought, we bring our minds to a certain state of tension and send out certain negative vibrations, which may be caught by other minds, and they may strengthen. And similarly, we catch, if we place our mind in that state of, we tune our mind to B flat, and another string is already vibrating at B flat, and ours starts to vibrate more loudly, and then they kind of both increase each other. And it really bears some research, actually. This could be, to a certain extent, could be scientifically researched, probably. Maybe the psychologists should take this idea up also for a test. According to Karma Yoga, the action one has done cannot be destroyed until it has borne fruit. No power in nature can stop it from bearing its results. This is the traditional analysis. What does Holy Mother say?
If you were destined to get a cut as wide as a plowshare, even if you do enough japa, you would still get a pinprick.
Right. You're bound to get something, but if you might be a plowshare. How wide is that? I mean, that's like a plowshare is like that, right? It's a pretty serious wound. If you do enough spiritual practice, you can reduce the strength of the reaction, but you need at least a pinprick. You need at least to step on a piece of glass and get a little cut, something like that. There's a Sanskrit verse here of the action one has done cannot be destroyed until it has borne fruit. It's from the Mahabharata. Yat karoti ashubham karma shubham va yari sattama avashyam tat samapnoti purusho natra samshaya. It cannot be destroyed. So Swami Vivekananda's works are full of quotations, and I had just referred to we're reading, as I've mentioned before, we're actually reading from the London edition of Karma Yoga, published, it's the unauthorized edition, published by Edward Sturdy. He received the transcripts of these classes for his own study and for sharing with the other students of the Vedanta students in London. And he immediately brought them to the printer and had them printed, almost unedited, practically unedited. And afterwards, the transcripts were edited and put into the book Karma Yoga in New York. And Swami Vivekananda wanted his works to be edited. He said, yes, edit them before you publish them. But for our study of this, I find it wonderfully refreshing to read the unedited version. There's a certain freshness of language that naturally gets polished when you edit something, and so both really could be studied side by side. So we get the edited version, which sometimes will clear things up a little bit, and yet the freshness of it. So there's obviously no references here, but the new edition of Complete Works, which is in the works, the people working on that have put in at least some of the references. So this, where he goes, he says this quote, no action can be destroyed until it has borne fruit. There's a scriptural reference, so these kind of references have been added and should be added. So it's wonderful. He quotes from Bible, he quotes from Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, the Mahabharata, etc., etc. He's vast repository of scriptural knowledge that he would put into his talks, but he wouldn't say the Mahabharata says or the Bible says. Of course, when speaking to Western audiences, the Bible quotes everyone would have been familiar with. They would say, "Oh yeah, right." So the action one has done cannot be destroyed until it has borne fruit. No power in nature can stop it from bearing its results. What about Holy Mother's quote? Maybe we can say that's not a power in nature. We're invoking divine grace. So by grace, which is beyond nature. If I do an evil action, I must inevitably suffer for it. There is no power in this universe to stop or stay it. So, if I do a good action, there is no power in the universe which can stop its bearing good result. The cause must have its effect. Nothing can restrain it. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That was 9th grade physics. And it holds good even on the level of karma. Now he's going to come to another point, which is that he's been talking about good actions and evil actions, and now he's going to take that to another step. Now comes a very fine and serious question about karma yoga. That these actions of ours, either good or evil, are intimately connected with each other. We cannot put a line of demarcation and say this action is entirely good and this action entirely evil. There is no action which does not bear good and evil at the same time. So this is at first maybe a little bit surprising, but if we think about it, yeah, it actually makes sense. Most good we can think of many good things, but someone somewhere may be harmed. Here he gives almost a silly example, but here I am talking to you, to take the nearest example, and some of you perhaps think I am doing good, and at the same time I am perhaps killing thousands of microbes in the atmosphere. I am doing evil to someone else. There cannot be any action in this world which will be entirely good or entirely evil. When it is very near to us and affects those we know, we say it is a very good action, if it affects them in a good manner. For instance, you may call my speaking to you very good, but the microbes will not. The microbes we do not see, but you I see. The affection to you is obvious, but that to the microbes is not obvious. And so, if we analyze our evil actions, we will find that some good was done somewhere. So it's almost a silly example, but we can see how it's very, very difficult to do something that's completely good and doesn't cause any harm somewhere. We can think that can be some homework. We can think it over. Think if we can think of an action that's entirely good doesn't do any harm at all. It's in Jainism, they have an interesting view of karma, which is really, Vedanta adds the idea of grace and of realization. When we gain full illumination, all our past karma is burnt up. It's set to naught. Whereas the Jains have a different, they take this very literally. Every action must bear its fruit. You cannot avoid it. So they have to bear, to get liberation, to get final liberation, they have to bear all the results. Hence, the monastic tradition is so austere and severe in Jainism. They have to bear, and they do it on purpose, they bear all the pains and discomfort to exhaust that karma, because the only way to to get liberation is to exhaust all the karma. So they do things like, we shave our head. It's very easy. They pluck their hair. They pluck their hair out, and Swami Swahanandaji used to say that while you're plucking, you have to say Sukham, Sukham, oh joy, oh joy. Keep a perfectly tranquil mind while you're removing all your hair by tearing it out. This is the Jain monasticism.
So there's no mitigation.
There's no idea of grace that, or in that idea that when we finally realize our true identity and know that this body is just a shadow, that then the karma, the karma that created this body will continue, but the rest of the karma that's stored up for the future lives, that gets burnt. So they don't have that. At least I read about it in books, the philosophy books of Jainism, so that's what we learned. How much they may have adjusted their understanding, we don't know. All right. And that's why they're also so careful not to cause any harm, wearing a mask so as not to inhale the microbes which might be injured, and sweeping insects off the path with a little broom, things like that. That's what reminded me of it, was the microbes that Swamiji's talking about killing. Though what does it matter to I mean, a microbe's just a microbe, but then to the microbe it matters. Even the microbes are the struggle for life. That is amazing, that even in the paramecium, under the microscope in 8th grade science class, you see they're living and they're trying to escape the predators and to eat the other microbes and all that. So, yeah. He who in good action sees that there is somewhere evil in it, and who in the midst of evil sees that there is something good in it, somewhere, he or she has known the secret of work. This was put in quotes, but it may be difficult to find the exact quote. A later editor has suggested that the Gita, chapter 4, he or she who sees action in inaction and inaction in action. That idea. Maybe Swamiji is kind of paraphrasing here. But this is beautiful, to know the secret of work. Why would that be knowing the secret of work? Previous class, the secret of work was non-attachment. Now the secret of work is understanding that even in a good action, there may be some evil in it. Even in a wicked action, there will be some good in it. Swamiji says, what follows from it? That however we may try, it is a very terrible conclusion to arrive at, but I must have it out. There cannot be any action which is perfectly pure, nor any which is perfectly impure, taking purity or impurity in the sense of injury or non-injury. A terrible conclusion. But I must have it out. So he's warning people, this is a little difficult to swallow. You can't have anything. And what follows from that, of course, that's what comes next. What follows from this? In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that you cannot breathe or live without injuring others. Let me just check the reference. It's last chapter of the Gita, verse 48. Sahajam karma kaunteya sadoshamapi na tyajit sarvaram bhahi doshena dhume nagnir ivavritaha. No, sorry. Dhume nagnir ivavritaha. One should not relinquish, O Arjuna, the duty to which one is born, though it is attended with evil, for all undertakings are enveloped by evil as fire by smoke. Dhume nagnir, as fire is always accompanied by smoke and sort of covers it, so every action has some dosha. Dosha is, here it's translated by evil, or we can call it defect. Everything has a defect. The Bhagavad Gita, it is said, you cannot breathe or live without injuring others, and every bit of food we eat is taken from someone else's mouth. My very life is crowding out some other lives. It may be human beings or animals or small fungus, but someone I have to crowd out. That being the case, it naturally follows that perfection can never be attained by work. This is the sobering fact. And we may say, well, yeah, but actually, what assumption do we have? We think somewhere that we can sooner or later fix everything in this world. We can fix everything. We can, if we just elect the right political leaders, and if everybody can be a little more unselfish, and we could actually fix everything here, and we could fix our own lives. You know, our own lives are a mess. We're not happy with our lives. You know, it's not yet there, but we're getting there, and we're going to get there, I think. No, says Swamiji, no, it's not going to happen. You cannot get perfection through work. It doesn't happen that way. Perfection can never be attained by work. We may work through all eternity, but there will be no way out of this intricate maze. You may work on and on. There will be no end. All right. So, but what follows from that? We'll see what follows from this. Okay, that's why that's when we start to develop that non-attachment. That's going to come, obviously. The second point to consider is, what is the result of work? We find people in every country, the vast majority of them, believing that there will come a time when this world will become perfect. There will be no disease, or death, or unhappiness, or wickedness. That is a very good idea. Of course, there is that idea of, they call it the millennium. And in Christian theology, Jesus is coming back, the second coming, and all the wicked will be smashed, and all the good, and we'll live, the lamb and the lion will live happily ever after in a new world. And we had a guy in Houston. I spent 2 weeks in Houston almost, and after I gave a talk on Sunday on the harmony of religions, Sri Ramakrishna and the harmony of religions, and we were all sitting down to lunch, and this guy comes in, and he wants to talk about Jesus. And we said, great, yeah, we love Jesus too, and all that, and he says, and then, yes, but. And there was always the but. And he had this, and then we'd say, well, I gave him some good stories, like Sri Ramakrishna's story of the pond and the different ghats, and the Muslims call it pani, and the Hindus call it jal, and the Christians call it water. And he said, yeah, that's nice. But, though he was very gentle, he wasn't aggressive, anything, but he was very persistent. And actually, there's a Sikh Gurudwara, a Sikh temple, as it were, right next door to our center in Houston. And when he came in, he first went into the temple, and 2 Sikhs came over, and they said, "Hey, that guy, he just came over, be careful." We kicked him out. So the Sikhs didn't have much patience for him. They kicked him out, but we actually entertained him for quite a while. We talked with him. I tried to convince him that, all religions are like different rivers flowing to the same ocean. And he could understand the ideas, it looks like, but there was always the but. So it was a little frustrating, and finally he left. Finally, I had to go somewhere, so I left, and finally I think they had to say, "We have to close the center now. You have to leave." So we also sort of kicked him out, and I was told that he seemed kind of shocked that because his last question was then, "So then you don't want Jesus?" And and the answer was, "Well, I have Jesus. Gee, I'm going to Jesus. I'll see you there." And he had this idea of there's going to be a new world, and in the new world, only the good people, only the followers of Jesus will be there. So that's where this came from. In the new world means after the second coming, all the wicked people will be destroyed. There'll be no disease. Everything will be hunky-dory forever. So. It's a rather immature view, rather like kindergarten of religion. It's, Swami Vivekananda would say, we go not from error to truth, but from lower truth to higher truth. So even there we see a grain of truth. There's some truth in it. Lower truth to higher truth. Let's ever go forward and go forward. But so this idea, sometimes even on the plane of science, the science will advance so much that we'll get rid of disease and all that, or either that or this idea of there'll be some kind of new world established by God. So Swamiji says, people in every country, the vast majority of them believing that there will come a time when this world will become perfect. There will be no disease or death or unhappiness or wickedness. That is a very good idea, a very good motive power for the ignorant. But if we think for a moment, we will find that on the very face of it, it is not so. How can it be, seeing that good and bad are the obverse and reverse of the same coin? How can you have good without evil at the same time? What is meant by perfection? A perfect life is a contradiction of terms. Life itself is a state of continuous struggle between ourselves and everything outside. Every moment you are fighting with the air, and if the air stops, your life will have to go. It is a continuous struggle against food. If food fails for one day, you go. Well, we can go for a few days. And life is not a simple effect, but a compound effect. Okay, so here's simple versus compound. A life is not a simple effect, but a compound effect. This compound struggle between something inside and the external world is what we call life. So on the very face of it, when this struggle ceases, there will be an end of life. So Swamiji's conceiving of life itself as struggle. And I think we can understand it. It seems perfectly correct. Life is struggle. There's a constant struggle for food, for fighting against disease. The immune system, we don't realize how much our immune system of this body is constantly working very hard to eliminate foreign agents. So on the very face of it, when this struggle ceases, there will be an end of life. What is meant by this ideal happiness is that this struggle will cease altogether. But then life will cease, and the struggle can only cease when life has ceased. So that's one side. And then he says, then again, before we have attained to 1,000th part of it, this earth will be cooled down, and we will not be. Now, I think the science has, astronomical science has advanced quite a bit. So in Swamiji's time, it was thought that everything will cool down. Actually, that's true, but before it cools down, it heats up. The sun becomes a red giant as it runs out of hydrogen. Most of the hydrogen has been fused into helium, and it's starting to run out of fuel, and it becomes a red giant, the outer limits of which are beyond the orbit of the Earth. So think of that. This Earth. The sun's going to swallow the Earth, absolutely. Yes. So at least that's what the astronomers say, and I think there's plenty of evidence seeing other stars, older stars, they become red giants, and then finally they collapse and become white dwarfs, or if they're massive enough, they become black holes. And I didn't get into physics much, so we can ask our Swami Vivekananda when he comes. He's well versed in physics, so he can tell us more about that. But what's sure is that Swamiji is correct, that pretty soon, in astronomical terms at least, pretty soon this Earth will not be. So it's a sobering, actually, in some ways it's a wonderful thought, you know? Because there's so much difficulty here and so much suffering, and like just seeing the climate crisis and think, oh my God, climate crisis. Well, there's going to be a different kind of climate crisis one day when the sun starts, well before the Earth actually gets swallowed up. Just think, it starts getting hotter and hotter, and pretty soon everything is eliminated here, and it's just a rock, a hot rock, like, Mercury or Venus. They're just hot rocks. There's no life there. The Earth that will also happen to the Earth. Maybe over at Saturn or Uranus, the life might start coming there as the sun gets bigger. Maybe that would be far enough that for a while, and then it would go there. Nothing is permanent in this world. So actually, it's it can be a beautiful thing to remind us of that. I'm wondering where there's a good place to stop, because we're coming to the end of our time, and I'm wondering if there's any questions or comments. He actually is going to circle back then, and I think we'll save this for the next class, but he's going to circle back then to this idea of doing good to the world. Actually, it's an impossibility. We try, and yet, on the one hand, we learn that we have to be unattached even to the good action we do, and secondly, that doing good to others is doing good to ourselves. The karma yoga is ultimately, yes, we do our best. Swami Vivekananda wanted us to serve those in need, because it's God's suffering in every, say, my God the ignorant, my God the hungry, my God the suffering. These are the God that I worship. And yet, can we truly help someone? It's difficult to say. We do our best, and we become purified. We reduce our that infatuation we have with ourselves, and become more holy that way. As our and as even the psychologists now are starting to find that as we become more unselfish, we become happier. It's not entirely intuitive at first, because we are taught by our culture teaches us, enjoy, amass wealth for yourself, make sure you have your insurance properly set up, and invest your funds here, and grow your money, and more money, more things, more pleasure means more happiness. And paradoxically, the result is less happiness. The more we dedicate our lives for the sake of others, the more generous we can be, the happier we become. So it's a Vedantic principle, and it's even the scientists are now surprised to find that it's so. Any questions, comments?
There's kind of
struggling to give a specific example, but from reading literature, I feel as though there's like sort of a make no plans attitude within, I guess, for a bhakti person, or even a karma yogi, right? Like if you believe that you're not the doer, then how can you like make a plan to do something? If you feel as though like God is moving you to do things, or as though you want that to happen, then how do you plan, I guess? I don't know. Is that
True, true. How do you, that is a very good question. If I'm not if we're taking that out, I'm not the doer, I surrender myself to God, so why make plans? And Swami Vivekananda also says, plans, you people are always making plans. I never make plans. I only say, awake, awake. He could say that. And yet, Swami Vivekananda, what did he do? He made plans. I mean, when traveling to place, he would say, there's one letter which he doesn't admit this too often. There's one letter where he's writing to probably Mrs. Oli Bull, and he says, yes, I'll be thinking to go to such and such a place next, and then he says, but I have to confide in you that I'm something of a mystic, and I never move without orders, and those have not come as yet. So he was getting divine guidance, what to do next, where to go next. But we don't necessarily get that. Our minds are not yet tuned to that level of tension that we can get that direct guidance. But look at Vivekananda, how much he asked his brother disciples and the devotees to work, to set in motion machinery for the good of the world and for uplifting India. So he had plans for a university. He had plans to teach people how to raise enough food. India was starving. They need to learn better agriculture, raise food, and so he had a lot of plans. He had plans for his order. He wrote out rules for the order. So we do have to make plans, but always remembering man or woman proposes and God disposes. So as we add devotion, we get that sense of surrender. It doesn't mean we don't make plans. It just means that karma yoga, we also make plans. If we're going to say decide we want to feed, feed some hungry people. Well, and we have to arrange something. We can't just say, let's see what God does to bring the food. No, we're going to have to go buy some food and cook it and then bring it and plan. We'll have to make some plans and bring it to the people and feed them. And we'll see. Maybe they'll be happy. Maybe they'll curse us. We don't know. And whether it will be doing good to them or not, we also don't know. Maybe it will. Tomorrow they'll be back for another meal. Maybe it wasn't doing so good to them because now they become expecting meals from us, and every day they're going to come for food, and when what they need to do is learn how to cook. Maybe we should teach them how to cook then. So.
The difference between I want to feed them and God wants to feed them be like you're suddenly in a position where you're able to feed people and it seems to flow naturally. I'm just wondering because when you say about Swamiji and his monks, like I definitely believe that there was that feeling, that confidence that God is guiding them. Mm-hmm. Those machines are being put in place. And so it's just like, I don't know. I guess it's just another song.
Well, each person's path is unique. And how much we plan. But we have to aim high. That's the thing. To surrender does not mean a state of torpor. Swami Vivekananda points out that the extremes look alike. So the extreme of absolute self-surrender and the extreme of don't do anything, they look kind of similar. One is a state of extreme torpor, tamas. Sleep, the couch potato, the couch yam, who just doesn't do anything, he sits there and watches TV all day. And the great saint. There's this one is described. I think Swamiji describes one saint who suddenly he wants to feed people, and he expresses the desire, and food arrives from nobody knows where. His wishes are fulfilled like that. So that's the great saint. We're not there. Maharaj will have a comment. Maharaj, any comment?
Yeah, honest question.
Yes. Self-surrender versus planning.
You see, so long we are planning for ourselves or mind in the physical level, we must plan. But when we find that we don't feel that we are a physical entity, automatically there will be no plan. But to reach that ultimate reality, we have to be within rules, regulations, to go beyond the rules. Finally, there will be no rules, there will be no plans. But to be unplanned, we have to make plans that we have to have some kind of life, different life, higher life. I should not sleep, I should not be lazy, I should take this, I should, whatever we think.
Yeah.
And another thing is, Swamiji said that the ancient religion used to say those who do not believe in God are the atheists. But new religion says those who
do not believe in themselves are the atheists.
So, man or woman proposes and God disposes. This was previous proverb. New proverb is, man or woman proposes, God disposes. But what God proposes, none can dispose.
When God proposes, none can dispose. None can dispose, yes.
So if we can melt down, merge, dissolve our own desires and plans with the God's plan, all our plans will be successful. Because it is merged with God's plan.
Yes. That state of self-surrender is actually a state of intense activity, actually. Girish Ghosh is the perfect example, no?
The sheep was going out at night, one bird came and was sleeping on the mast of the sheep.
Oh, this is the story of the ship and the mast, yeah.
It finds that a ship has gone outside. It is in the deep sea. Now it is awake now, and now find all around the water. It goes to the south, it goes to the north, it goes to nowhere it gets anywhere. So again it comes back because only one place is there, that mast. Again, it without any effort, it stands here, it sits here, whatever comes. Also, we will do plan, program, self-effort, things that finally we will find that our effort is not that sufficient to reach that ultimate goal. Be it supreme devotion, be it supreme liberation.
We tire our wings.
If I cannot remain, then I become a jnani, that I don't need anything. God will come to me. That is also a kind of absolute realization, experience, that God will do everything to reach that condition. We have to do something. We will find, finally, I cannot do this myself. I need God's help, and finally, actually, whatever is happening, it's God's help. We also, with the age, we understand. Young age, we have so many plans, programs, this, that I can change the whole world. But gradually, we surrender. There is nothing wrong and shame in it. Swami Vivekananda is telling that do you think, talking to Nivedita, how many times I struggled? Every time I questioned, I was putting forward my arguments with Sri Ramakrishna. But finally, I did not believe in Mahakali. He did not enter Mahakali's temple 5 long years after 1884, till his father passed away. Finally, he says, now I understand Kali has possessed me, which I did not believe in. Now that Kali has possessed me, I understand. I am not working. Kali is working through me. Master has made this. Now I cannot question Master's realization, Master's experiences, which I everything questioned, every moment. So with experience we find self-effort not. To come to that realization, Vivekananda had so much of effort. No, all power is within you can do anything and everything. You stand up and express your divinity within. You are the creator of your, maker of your fate. You, what you are, it is the result of your past. What you want to be, do whatever you want to be, you will be the result of your present. So all these things are there. Finally we understand that even the leaf of the tiny leaf of the tree does not move without the wish of God. We are also doing through God's will, because we have some good samskaras. By trying and trying and trying, we have got this human body. And that also Manushyattam, Mahapurusha Samskara, human body, then Mukshuttam, desire to be relieved and liberated, and then a guide, a guru. These things we have got through God's grace, but God's grace on those, that also is proverb. God helps those who help themselves. And that take a long time.
So let's take just a moment of silence, and then we can adjourn. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to study with you Vivekananda's Karma Yoga. And we'll continue the next time.
We all enjoy.
Yeah.
Not feeling that time is passing.